What's the emergency?
No problem. All units are by
I'm at the corner of Pleasant Hill and John Young Freeway.
1519 East 18.
Welcome back to Crime Solvers Central. I'm Jace.
And I'm Charlie.
Tonight, we're covering one of the darkest serial murder cases in American history, Dean Corll, also known as the Candyman, and the case that became known as the Houston mass murders.
This is a case involving abduction, the sexual and murder of numerous boys and young men in the Houston area during the early 1970s. Officially, Corll is tied to 28 victims, but one of the biggest lingering questions is whether that number tells the full story.
And joining us tonight is Katie Brannon from the Dark Types with Katie YouTube channel, who has previously covered this case. Katie, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is one of those cases that is horrifying, and not just because of what happened, but because of how much may still be unknown. There's a lot of questions still unanswered.
Yes, and that's really what we want to focus on here tonight. Not just the known crimes, but the possibility that there were more victims than the official count.
Now, for anyone who may not know the full story, Dean Corll was a serial killer operating in the Houston and Pasadena, Texas area in the early 1970s. He is most commonly linked to the murders of at least 28 boys and young men. Most of them were teenagers. The crimes later became known as the Houston mass murders. The killings stretched from 1970 to 1973. And what makes the case especially disturbing is that Corll did not act entirely alone. He used teenage accomplices to help him gain access to victims and to keep the crimes going.
And Corll had a public image that helped him avoid suspicion. He worked in his family's candy business. That helped lead to the nickname, the Candyman. On the surface, he could come across as friendly, quiet, and approachable, especially to younger people in the neighborhood. But behind that image, investigators later found a pattern of very calculated predatory behavior. He targeted young boys and young men. He pulled them into his orbit. Then he subjected them to kidnapping, sex, torture, and murder.
A major part of the case is the role of his two known accomplices, David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. Both were teenagers when they became involved with Corll. According to later accounts of the case, they helped lure victims to him. They used friendship, familiarity, promises of parties, rides, alcohol, drugs, or just a place to hang out. Their involvement is one of the reasons the case became so large. It is also one of the reasons the case is so difficult to understand in simple terms. This was not just one predator acting in complete isolation. Corll had created a system around himself.
The crimes themselves were methodical. Victims were typically brought to Corll's residence or another location under his control. There, they were restrained, assaulted, tortured, and eventually killed. Their bodies were then hidden in multiple burial sites, including a boat shed in southwest Houston, graves near High Island, and another burial area near Lake Sam Rayburn. That use of multiple disposal sites is one reason this case still raises questions today. It suggests planning. It suggests concealment. And it raises the possibility that the known victim total may not reflect the full number of people Corll murdered.
What's also important to note is how the case finally came to light. Because Corll was never arrested and fully interrogated, the entire case broke open on August 8, 1973. That was the day Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. shot Corll at Corll's home in Pasadena. Henley told police that he'd acted in self-defense. Officers responding to the scene initially thought that they were dealing with a single homicide, but once Henley began talking, the true scale of the crime started to emerge. His statements led investigators to burial sites. From there, the case expanded into one of the most horrifying murder investigations in U.S. history.
And that detail matters a lot when discussing the unanswered questions in this case, because Corll died before law enforcement could question him. Investigators were forced to reconstruct much of the murder timeline through physical evidence, through burial site discoveries, and through the statements of Brooks and Henley. That means official counts reflect what could be proven, but it also leaves open a haunting possibility that there may be additional victims who were never found, never identified, or never conclusively tied to him.
So when people hear Dean Corll case, they should really think of 3 connected stories happening at once. The story of a serial killer, the story of the teenage accomplices who helped him, and the story of the victims, many of whom were young, vulnerable, and in some cases not taken seriously enough when they first disappeared. Actually, not taken seriously enough at all, any of them. That is a huge part of why this case still matters. It is not only about the horror of what happened in 1973. It is also about the very real possibility that the full scope of the crimes may never be completely known.
Mama.
Who's this?
It's Wayne.
Yes, this is Mama, baby.
Mama?
Yeah?
I killed Dean.
Wayne?
Elmer Wayne Henley used Cato's car phone to call his mom after killing Dean Corll. Henley and Corll, along with Randy Brooks, are accused in one of the worst mass killings in Houston's history. At least 28 young men lured, kidnapped, and killed.
So, to start off, Katie, who was Dean Corll in the public, and why was he able to avoid suspicion for so long?
What's horrifying, Jace, is that he appeared ordinary and approachable. They actually said he was charismatic and nice, especially to the neighborhood kids. The public image helped mask his predatory behavior. He exploited trust, familiarity, and the fact that many people did not imagine someone like him committing crimes on that scale. So when you think of the Candyman, Jace, you automatically think, man, this guy is just going up to kids and giving them candy. Red flag, right? But at the same time, his mom owned a candy factory, and they had the best pecans, apparently, in Texas. They actually were rivals with the Prince Pecan, another factory. So when Dean came to give the people candy and the kids, they honestly thought it was all good and fun. They didn't see anything wrong with it whatsoever.
Why do you think this case doesn't get discussed as much as other serial killer cases?
I honestly think because how deeply disturbing it is and involves many young victims and doesn't always get the same media focus as more famous killers. It happened in the early 1970s, and some cases from that era faded from broader public discussion, which is very frustrating because this is John Wayne Gacy territory. John Wayne Gacy did the handcuff trick. Ladies, have you heard of the handcuff trick? Well, what John Wayne Gacy would do when he lured young teenagers into their home with, hey, let's get high, let's drink beer, let's have fun, let's chill, right? Well, when people start getting relaxed, they're sharing, guys becoming guys, John Wayne Gacy brought out the handcuffs and put them on himself. He's like, look, it's a magic trick. And started handcuffing. He's like, yeah, you want to try? And that's how he got him. Dean Corll did the same exact thing. That's why there's speculation that actually they may have known each other. But the fact that Dean Corll was killed by an accomplice, which is way insane when we talk about it towards the end of the podcast, because actually it was a young woman that stopped everything. It's insane. Just by 2 phrases, like ninja'd that kid's brain to finally fight. So I think it should be talked about more, frankly, because there are so many other kids missing. Again, it is speculation, ladies, but now they're saying that Dean Corll could have been killing at age 19 years old. And I'll say in the beginning, starting with this, at 9 years old, he learned about sex. And I was wondering, oh God, that's horrific. Like, what happened to him? He looked at the barn animals because he was raised on a farm. So, as I did my research, ladies, I could not find the horrible abuse that happened to Dean Corll to do these horrible acts to these little boys. I think that's what's scary of all. He began his being a psychopath, with his mimicking people's personalities. Because remember, I said he was very charismatic, very talkative, very, kind and everything. But guess what, though? Big red flag. He didn't have any friends. That's a huge red flag. You can have a guy come in, talk, everybody's loving him, everything's great. But when you look really deep, that's when I noticed, ladies, he did not have any friends. So, yeah, rough.
You're correct. He didn't have any friends. I mean, what he did have, unfortunately, were accomplices. Now, in your opinion, how important were David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. to Corll's ability to keep killing?
They were extremely important. Corll did not operate in total isolation. As I dug up more research, researchers think that before these kids became accomplices, that he was already killing at 19 years old. But Dean Corll had this thirst that I have never heard of my whole entire life. It is like unhuman, his thirst for little boys. So he hired these accomplices in the beginning for money. He actually took the vulnerable. And you have to realize, yes, these kids are horrible. Henley and them, they should be locked away and thrown away the key, One is already deceased because of COVID, and the other one is still actually in prison right now. And just to let you know, guys, in 2025, he was denied parole, which is awesome because these kids were 12 years old. Yeah, 12. And then these killings happened for 3 years. Dean was killing like a kid a week. It was awful. So these accomplices, though, they actually were groomed and abused by Dean, like themselves. And they didn't want it to happen anymore. So can you imagine horrible things happening to you and the person that's doing it be like, hey, you know what? I'll let this stop if you find somebody else for me. I will give you, he was giving them equivalent of $3,000 in today's money to carry it out. And not all the time either, because it seemed like these two kids had some kind of bloodline. I don't know if it was in their bones, because I don't care if I'm 10, 12, 9. I don't want to see anybody cry and get at all, because I feel, I don't know about you ladies, even when we were kids, when you see someone cry, you stop, right? These kids didn't. So their involvement is honestly the key to understanding why the victim count became so high, because they trusted him, which is disgusting. They actually were friends. They grew up together, and he let Dean have them. But when I was reading the interviews, those kids actually thought they were going to be sold into something. They did. But then when they walked into the horrific act and heard the sounds and saw what he was doing, then they were like, oh my gosh. But the money was just too good, which is horrible. I don't know about you ladies. There's not enough money in the world to do to those little boys what was done to them.
So how do you think we should think of Brooks and Henley? Are they victims? Were they, willing participants? Were they both? A really complicated thing to look at.
It is, because like I said, 12 years old or younger, that's young, right, ladies? Right, Jace and Charlie? That's young. But they did have actual traits of, being a psycho. You really would trade in your friends for $3,000 for something. Man, no big deal. They're just going to get, touched once in a while. What? I'm sorry. I can't imagine. I do believe the kids were manipulated. I really do. Manipulated. I do believe the kids didn't have a correct, maybe father figure at home. I don't personally know that. But I do know that when you hear a child scream or they're begging to stop and you keep on going, and then you actually do, you actually enter the and you do what exactly Dean is doing, I think you're sick. And I think that they're not victims. I'm sorry. In the beginning, I did with my research. I read the horrific things that he did to the and bit them. And I'm PGing right now. Like, it's awful, awful. But why would you let that happen to somebody else if you didn't like it? Am I right?
Yeah, and that's obviously not to excuse the what horrific things may or may not have happened to them. We don't know for sure. Exactly.
Yeah, we only know
and
what
I
they
think that
said. Yeah.
True, absolutely. And I think that order of magnitude is probably what also helped enable him, the fact that he had so many victims. In your opinion, what makes that official number of 28 feel like potentially incomplete to so many people, so many researchers?
Well, back in when he was working at the candy factory, this is kind of wild. He was actually known late at night to have burial sites on the candy factory, and he said that's where he was discarding bad candy. Yeah, that's what his excuse was. I don't know about you ladies, but when you discard candy to not let the bugs get them, you don't just bury them and put cement over them. Am I right? Because that's what he did before the accomplices came. And I know we still haven't excavated that particular site yet. So because the case was pieced together after Corll's death, there are multiple burial sites were involved. Some victims are unidentified for years. Like one, I think, was like 35 years it took to identify them. And there are also broader questions about missing boys in the area. So the official count may be the minimum rather than the absolute total. And we know all this, you guys, not because a lot of speculation. Don Henley and David Brooks talked about it. They sang like canaries because they wanted shorter sentences. So they said it all. But it is very hard because at the same time, it could be, well, did the 12-year-old boys manipulate Corll? Very highly unlikely. Corll is much, much older. But there are definitely more sites because even on High Island, guess what's there, ladies? Water. So water could have just pushed, bodies through. This is the 1970s. It's quite a while ago. I think we're still going to keep finding body parts, unfortunately, in Houston.
And so what's the meaningful difference between known victims and what we think are the total victims?
Oh, man. The known victims are the ones that can be confirmed through forensic evidence. The total victims is a broader question that may not be fully answered. With the known victims that were found in that boat shed, and they actually were mutilated in their private part, and police actually saw that, like the way they were just thrown in there, like they were nothing, like rag dolls. And what's horrifying is the total one, like I said in the beginning, we don't know how many there are. Daniel and Don actually said that Dean killed a lot more even before. And I don't understand how you can manipulate somebody and taking a human life like it's absolutely nothing. Like if you read their testimony statements, they act like it's not a big deal. Which I'm like, are you serious? How's that not a big deal? That's a human life. There are parents to this day and family members are wondering what happened to their loved ones. It is a big deal. It really is.
Absolutely. And of course, we talked about how this happened in the 70s around the same time as John Wayne Gacy. And whether or not they were involved with each other, what role do you feel the social climate of the time played in this case, going undetected?
I mean, missing teenage boys may not always be treated with urgency, and in this case, it was not even treated at all. Some families may not have gotten immediate law enforcement attention. Honestly, nobody did. Assumptions that kids may have simply run away likely contributed to delayed recognition. Honestly, no, it's disgusting how negligent the police department was, and I am all for in blue. I really am. I'm not trying to be controversial here. In the 1970s, I thought, it was a different time, I guess we can say. But maybe the police really thought, hey, they're just runaways. But there was just so many of them. And I think the worst ones was when Dean got Don and Wayne to call the victim's family and bring them hope and doing a ransom, not knowing they already killed their little boy. That is sick. Like, that's sick. And it only took an officer's son to be taken for them to actually take it seriously. And unfortunately, nothing came of that. The father was stressed out of his mind and died of a heart attack 3 weeks later. Dean Corll became undetected for a very long time until one of the accomplices took matters into his own hands.
Do you feel like this is a case where especially vulnerable victims were overlooked?
100%. Many victims were young, vulnerable, and easy for society to dismiss at the time. I don't understand why there was no urgency at all. Like, okay, 1 or 2, yeah, but there's so many boys missing in a small, amount of time. And when the parents came and was like, help me find my boy, I mean, some of them called their parents and was like, they're like, hey, it's late. What are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm fine, Mom. Just going out, hanging out with some people. And like nothing was, and then gone. You know what I'm saying? And then they're either, as soon as they get off the phone, Dean Corll killed them right after the phone call. Like, it's horrible. Like, these killings were not just done by one person was strangled, one person was shot. No, it was very methodical. I mean, sometimes he took little boys for days at a time. And you got to imagine yourself like you have a child, and I'm sorry to do this, and they're just going to this, going swimming with his friends, like Highgeist. He sticks in my head so much. Highgeist actually just went for a swim and never came back. He was a good little boy. And then when the parents went, I mean, they were just like, no, he ran away, blah, blah, blah. So there's so many parents that went into their own hands and like hired people, went in a massive amount of debt trying to find their children, which I hope you agree, Charlie and Jace. I don't have children yet, but I would do everything in my power to find my kid, all resources. And there's no excuse for that police department. I mean, I don't know if they were just eating donuts all day and just enjoying the somewhat benefits back in the day, or the crimes are too horrific, the rumors that they're like, I don't even want to know, which is horrible.
Yeah, I mean, we could speculate about it, but it's so hard to know for sure. And especially the fact that he had people working alongside him. How much do you feel he relied on control, planning, and routine rather than impulse? Do you think any of these were impulsive murders, or do you think that they were mostly planned out?
I think the case feels a lot organized. These killings were very methodical. There was a repeat pattern, the burial methods, and the use of the accomplices all suggest planning rather than purely spontaneous violence. I think the planning was like, hey, I want a little boy now, get him. Or he would point out, he's like, I want him. I know, it's horrible. And they would do that. They would befriend the kid. Then in the statements of Don and Daniel, to forget which one said what, but one of them said that sometimes, they thought, okay, he's just going to strangle him, it's just going to have some. But then they had no idea Dean was going to torture the kid for days. So I do think there was planning because he wanted a kid, but I think the impulse happened because of what the kid did or what he said or how he screamed. That we do not know 100% for sure, but how he got the kids were extremely calculated and organized.
Going into this today, you said like this is the worst, crime you could ever think of in history. You tried to warn me how disturbing this would be. What is the most disturbing piece of all of this for you?
I care about you, ladies, and there are some things that are just better left unsaid because I don't want it to come as exploitative. But I will tell you a scene that doesn't seem too rated R, but you got to think of the psychological aspect. I'm going to bring up the Waltrip brothers. So he captured the Waltrip brothers. And what he did was he put them on the Dean Corll would put these boys on a big board, on a plywood board, and handcuff them there. Why this disturbed me so much, that he got 2 of the brothers, 1 on each board, 1 handcuffed, 1 arm handcuffed, and then the other one handcuffed and the other one free. And these kids, they're crying. They want to they want to like leave, right? So what Dean told them to do, their brothers, mind you, was to beat each other to death. One of them will live. What ended up happening is, yes, the hitting happened. The brothers were hitting each other until nearly of exhaustion. I'm sure crying and disgust and guilt. But what Dean ended up doing was taking a boat down south and strangling both of them. The level of psychological and physical disgust doesn't even touch. And I will not mention what objects were used on these little boys or what was done to their private parts, but just any person who has a male appendage, it is the worst thing you could ever imagine. So I will spare you those details. But I brought up those brothers because that really, really got me. And then, of course, the parents who paid all this money to find their kid, and they never found him. And he was one of the first, they killed him like right away. I'm very curious about why the kids were killed the way they were. Some were just simply strangled. Some were 20 days. Some were completely just like psychologically tortured and physically tortured. And it wasn't just the blonde hair, blue eyes. He captured a lot of kids. Like, he had the nickname the Pied Piper. I think just by talking about that, that's extremely disturbing. His mother, Mary, yes, Mary, I'm calling you out, was extreme denial. She actually blamed everything on the 2 little accomplices, on the boys, saying that they manipulated her son into doing what he did.
It's nigh impossible to get into the heads.
I need a second, guys.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Can we just take like 1 second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is like literally embodies pure evil. Like, yeah. I don't think I've ever heard anything worse in my entire life.
I tried to tell you. I tried to tell you, Charlie. I tried.
Hey,
I wrote
just a moment.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to get a tissue. They won't stop.
Yeah, no,
they just won't stop. Hold on 1 sec. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
why would the law enforcement be so negligent unless one of them are involved? You know what I'm saying? I hate to say that, but holy crap, that's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
A lot of kids.
Especially if one of them was one of their sons.
Yes, yeah. It's bad. It's bad. Like when I was like, you got to be kidding me. And then they started, and when Dean was telling them, like, yeah, there's a huge ring from Dallas all the way to California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have it because, again, to me, it just embodies pure evil. And I'm like, I can't. Like, I
even
can't.
The Satanist,
I don't want to be blind to what happens in the world, but I don't feel like I need to go into detail either.
Yeah.
Because it's just disgusting and horrible.
I held back, Charlie. Believe it or not. I really did, honey. I held back. Because I know exactly.
I appreciate, like, reading the question before I actually spoke it. I'm like, I'm gonna hate the answer that I get right now.
I felt that from Charlie.
Yeah, it's also important, that people are aware. And like, to your point, there's a lot of unidentified victims. Like we just know of the number that was, confirmed or identified. There's so many more. So
But
many
the
more
police,
families
the police
and
stopped digging
kids.
though, Charlie. The police stopped digging because by then in 1973, it was the largest serial killing of all time. So the police were embarrassed and they made them stop digging. That's why Jace and I agreed that, man, this is rough, but how do you think the families feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree.
That's what I keep thinking about. I'm not thinking about the tour. I'm thinking about how much I love these boys, even though I don't know them. And I want to let them know they can hear us, that they are loved no matter what. And what happened to them was not their fault. And I pray that they receive some kind of peace.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. At the end, I didn't see the last question, but I'll tell you guys how it all stopped. It's friggin' crazy. It was what Henley did. Yeah, it's because of what one girl said to him.
I should probably ask that question so I can go into it just a little bit.
Do you think it's appropriate? The first thing she said, because I don't know, I should tell you, but as Dean was naked and he was like, her boyfriend, but Dean apparently didn't like women or was scared of them. I don't know, but Don Henley had a friend, Hawkins, and I don't know if it's in there. And she was 15 or 16. And they were just hanging out. And then Dean actually turned on Henley and was like, "You're going to die." So he ties him up. And then Henley talks, "Yeah, this is nuts." And he was like, "You should have never brought a girl. You should have never brought a girl." And Henley begged, like, "Hey, no, I'll do anything, Dean. I'll do anything." He's like, "You'll do anything? All right." And so he was going to torture the boyfriend, which he was. And then they were going to put her on the board and they were cutting her clothes off. He was cutting her clothes off really slowly. She wakes up, looks at him, and she's like, "Is this for real?" And Don was like, "Yes." And she looked at him and said, "Are you going to do something about it?" And Don said after that, he had this huge wave of remorse. And isn't that wild? And that's when
what did it?
That's what did it. He got the .22 caliber gun and was pointing it at Dean. And Dean was like, "Come on, man, shoot me." And, whatever Don said or whatever. And he shot him right in the forehead, but it was a .22 caliber from the 1970s. So it didn't really penetrate him, but he kept on shooting. So Dean actually bled to death, butt naked on the floor. So that's why they said it was self-defense in the beginning. And then finally Don yelled, "I have to get this off my chest." And that's when he started spilling.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
So in true crime history, in general, why do you feel this that this event, Henley killing Corll, is just a major turning point?
She questioned his manhood, which is the irony of all, in a sick, twisted way. She really did, because when you question a man, like, I feel like this is any man. I mean, whoever's listening, and if someone's like, "Are you going to do something about it?" What are you going to do about it? They're going to be like, "Oh, I got to do something about it. I have to do it." Because for some reason, that simple phrase made him have so much remorse. He said he felt this wave of remorse. And he saved his friend's life getting brutally assaulted because he was doing it, like the whole Pulp Fiction thing at the end. And the guy was crying and said, "You saved my life." But then now when you look at it and he found out what Don was a part of and Brooks, he's like, I don't know whether to hug him because he saved my life or beat the out of him. I say beat the out of him, frankly. I don't condone violence, but in this situation, man, I really do. I just don't understand how money could actually cause all of this, because it was money. Because he was like, the kid walked in on Dean doing that to somebody. And he was like, "Hey, I'll buy you a car. Hey, I'll do this." But I don't know about you ladies. That's not enough for me. I don't think anything would ever be enough for me to do that to somebody else. So he picked these boys because because they were from lower income families, but Dean got greedy and started picking different kids, and he didn't know who their parents were. He just was like this insatiable monster. I don't even think he was human, frankly, Charlie. In my opinion, I don't know if he was possessed or what have you, but that is the worst evil I think I've ever heard of. Him and the Gainesville Ripper. That's right up there.
Had Henley not shot him that day, how long do you think this would have continued? All this would have gone on.
I think it would have never stopped. That's what's like the double-edged sword here. The accomplice killed Dean, but at the same time, what's scary is that, if he didn't, I think it would have still been going on until Dean died. I think he would have gotten more accomplices. I think there would be more corruption going on. I think people know way more than they let off. I think there is a lot of things that are going to be said on deathbeds. That's for sure. Especially in the higher ups that want their status and power. Maybe they had to have, I don't know. But I will say that I do believe in what happened to those boys because of the forensic evidence. And they actually could see what torture was involved and what was true when the boys were testifying and trying to have lighter sentences, which, thank goodness, they did not at all.
So what do you think that the burial sites tell us about the scale of the crimes?
I think they suggest a prolonged pattern and a deliberate effort to conceal bodies. Multiple sites also raise the question of whether every location connected Corll was ever found. There actually have been sites that were, excavated, but I think they're looking at the wrong way. And plus, 1970s, bodies move. Soil moves, and Texas has gone through a lot of wacky weather lately. So I do think there are more burial sites because even though he was a methodic killer pattern, he killed some kids impulsively. So I do believe there are a lot more kids to be found. And I really pray that even though it's been the 1970s, in the afterlife, I believe there's no time. So I honestly pray and give good energy to the kids that I hope they found peace. I really do. And I hope they know that, they are loved no matter what. I mean, even Charlie learning about them and Jace, I can tell you all love them because the story is really getting to you. And it really should, because it should have never happened. It should have never gone as long as it had. I mean, I feel like in today, maybe 1 or 2, I think people would fight. I think people would be like, what the heck is that screaming? But there are so many blind eyes or just the flashes of smiles and money and to just let people look the other way. And that's something I don't think I could ever understand.
So what kinds of unsolved cases should investigators and research compare to Corll today?
What kind of, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, what I think maybe even if I just rephrase it to how I'm thinking of it, like investigators today, like if we're to bring this case into modern times, what kind of case today do you think would even compare to that one? Is there something even comparable? I hope not. I would hope there's nothing to ever compare to this case.
No, he's worse than Ted Bundy. He's worse than Ted Bundy. He's worse than Jeffrey Dahmer. He's worse than John Wayne Gacy. And when you Google him to see what he looks like, he just looks like any kind of regular guy. He didn't look like a creep. And I think that's what's scary of all, because yes, there are people that are not born with good looks and they look kind of creepy, maybe missing teeth or bad hygiene. But it's the ones that are clean cut, that shake hands with the big guys. Those are the ones that we need to actually look at. Like, yes, they're charismatic. Okay, awesome. But when he spends a little too much time with the children and makes little sly remarks, that's when you have to notice red flags. But honestly, I think this one, the Candyman, is the worst of them all. I have never in my research, and I've researched a lot of horrific things. Even in foreign countries, there's a lot of horrible killers out there. But I think the Candyman takes the cakes because it could have been stopped. It really could have. So out of all the cases with the torture and everything, I've read stuff like that from around the different countries. But as for the United States, I have never seen anything or read anything this horrific in my life. And I hope to never see that ever again.
Myself as well. I think that it's thankfully harder now for get to that level of magnitude when it comes to victims.
Yes.
We don't see quite as many serial killers as we used to, which is good. It's a lot harder to go under the radar. But when it comes to these possible additional victims, how careful do we want to be? How careful do we want to be in talking about them?
Well, we want to be very careful. You know, Jace, it's responsible to say that there's many more victims, but it's not responsible to present unproven numbers as facts. I get that. But there's also, there's evidence where he dug up, I don't know about you ladies, but I understand when candy goes bad, you want to put them in holes, I guess, when it goes bad so the bugs won't get them. But would you put cement over it? No. Why would you? So I think but we do need to be careful in this podcast. This is allegedly, but it's going up to 100 people that they think was not found. 100. That's kind of a jump from 28 to 100. But investigators think how, his psychopathy at such a young age, I think at 8 or 9 years old, he started literally killing in his late teens by himself. And he grew up on a farm. So again, that says a lot, but it's all speculation. But the bodies that were found were mostly in a boat shed. That's the bodies were found and on High Island. I do think so, Jace and Charlie, that we need to keep searching. There's a couple spots that I read in 2024, 2021. They started. Honestly, just keep going. They're there and they want to be found. Or I wouldn't have done this story again because I promised myself and my viewers I would never do this story again. I know, guys, never say never, but it feels right to talk about this, to be like, no, there's families out there that we don't even know, ladies, that are like, yeah, so I did have a cousin, or I did have a great something, and right? And they don't know what the heck happened to them. Their story is, oh, well, he ran away at 15, or he ran away at 12. I think the families need to rise up, and there are families out there, with all due respect, that don't want to hear about it. They're done. They just want to heal. They want to go away, and that's fine. But this is not what the podcast is for. It's not for you. This is for the podcast, for the families that want answers. This is for the families that want to let people know, hey, we were not believed. Our loved one was not taken seriously at all. And all these kids looked like all kinds of different kids. It wasn't just like Ted Bundy went for the tall, thin, or no, short. His thing was, Jace, was it just a brunette and dark eyes, something like that? Well, Dean Corll didn't even discriminate. All kinds of kids.
In your opinion, why and how do some serial killer cases become mythology? And how do we avoid that here?
By centering the victims, sticking to evidence, avoiding the sensationalism, and clearly separating the confirmed facts from informed speculation.
And what do you want viewers to remember about these victims here today, in this case?
That they were not just statistics. They're not just names in a book that we're reading or, doing a podcast about. They actually were real kids. They were sons. Okay, they were brothers, friends, and young people whose lives were just stolen. Like, they vanished in like thin air, seems like. The victims deserve to be actually more centered more than the killer does. And usually, I know in the beginning it was kind of rough, but I'm telling you, listeners, I held back in what I know because I care about all of your psyches and I don't want it to become exploitative. But I feel like I did kind of really lets you kind of understand how horrible what happened. And it didn't need to happen at all. So I really want to focus on the little boys that are not ever coming home. And they never have. And to the family that's probably, sitting in a rocking chair now because we're in the 1970s and just, wondering, like, I wonder what happened to him. I wonder if he did, live his dreams. And I bet you there are families out there that were like, yeah, he ran away and he went to go chase his rock and roll dream. Yeah. But maybe he was mad at something I did and never came back. That's why it's frustrating, ladies, because there are parents that think like that. Because sometimes it's good. This is where ignorance is better. Ignorance is bliss in this kind of opinion. Because would you ladies want to know what happened to your sons? Or would you rather be like, you know what, he ran away. He changed his name. He got married. He had kids. But he was mad at me, so he didn't talk to me again. That's the thing. That's the real boogeyman, in my opinion, is just the grief, the not knowing, the confusion, and the detrimental, loss that happened to these families.
I agree. I mean, the unknown has such an effect on grief and the way that people handle grief. There's no full way of knowing whether getting the truth is going to bring you closure or re-traumatization. And you never know until it happens, until you get that truth. But I think the reason that we're here today is just because we think that the truth matters, even if the people who are directly affected by it don't want to learn the truth. I think it still matters. And we've talked a bit about the negligence, the possible incompetence that was showcased by the investigators, the police. And I think that this case is probably a story of investigative failure. And how, in your opinion, did they miss the warning signs?
Man, they missed a lot. It reflects on how social blind spots, assumptions about runaways, failures to connect patterns. They failed as in, when young boys ran away. This is the 1970s. So I think that the police, honestly, the town's responsibility is to educate children, is to say, don't take, candy from strangers. And someone actually commented in one of my, I think my messages that they're like, is this where the don't take candy from strangers came from? It may have, right, ladies? I mean, we've all heard it. Maybe this was the case. I don't understand even to this day why the police were so negligent about it unless the higher ups had something to do with it. That's the only thing. Because in today, are you kidding me? They be on you. Just like Jace said, you are not going to go undetected. We got TikTok. We got phones with cameras. We see something or hear something, we're going to run and go check it out. Not in a horror movie sense. Or if we're scared, we're still going to go and get help. I pray that's what you guys do, you podcasters. When you see something, you say something, But I think people back then are just like, nah, none of my business. I don't know. Who knows? It's going to be okay. But what happens if it's not okay? And this is the clear case of what can happen if people literally don't give a crap.
Yeah. And I think back then during that time period too, a lot of kids, maybe Gen Xers, that generation, you get up in the morning, you're released into the wild and you're told to be home before the street light comes on. But that time in between, there's not a cell phone. There's not a page. There's zero communication with other than you on your bicycle going from friend to friend to friend's house, to the point where they literally had a commercial that would come on at night. It was like, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? Right? So very different time. Whereas now, even if you did release your children into the wild, in the morning and they didn't come home until later in the evening, to your point, there are cell phones. There are cameras at every street, street lights, there's so much more technology nowadays to where, not to say something like this couldn't happen, but I think it would have been caught a lot sooner.
Oh, yeah.
A lot sooner. And there is all this stuff that kind of, I would think or hope, would make somebody like that think twice about the things that they're trying to do.
Or get psychological help.
You're going to see something. Everybody's going to see something nowadays. But back then, yeah, very different time. So next question. I know when a lot of people think about serial killer, right? They think one person. How does Corll, how does this challenge that thought? How does this maybe challenge that way of thinking?
It's so different, Charlie. That's such a good question. It actually shows that some serial murder cases can involve coercion. I can never say that word. Coercion. I can never say that. So I don't like the word.
Coercion.
Corrosion?
Coercion.
Coercion.
None of us can say that.
It's
all of us.
Word.
We know what we're talking about, though.
I know, but it's a horrible word, But accomplices and a wider network of control. I think what's scary is, like, I'm not trying to give him any notoriety or anything believes, but he was disgustingly brilliant because he found those two kids and knew he could groom them. And not only that, but make him do his bidding. And I think that is the worst of all. Like, how can a psychopath find another psychopath? Because according to psychologists, is it 100,000? Yeah, it's like 1 in 10,000. I can't remember, guys. It's like the extra zero or not. You can look it up. But 1 in 10,000 is a psychopath. Like, this is one of those cases where you're like, okay, I'm human again. Because sometimes we as researchers, ladies, sometimes we're like, are we desensitized by what we read? But this is the case where I'm like, no, I'm not. I have a lot of feelings. I'm not desensitized at all. I actually need a hug right after. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just need a hug. But he is a very different kind of case. That's why I'm like, I'm so happy he's gone. I really, really am. But I wish he was captured before. And I wish we picked his brain apart. Like, dude, what happened that was so bad to make you such a psychopath, to get you so turned on with not only the P aspect, but the torture aspect? That's like, how the heck are you both? And then not only that, right, Charlie and Jace, is to get other kids into that. And like I said before, ladies, I don't even think this guy was like human. And I think his brain he was not born with the with hypothalamus. Am I saying that right, Jace? It's like the fear or the empathy. It's something in your brain that you have. We all have it, but he did not have it, like, at all. Like,
it acts almost as if it's a barrier, like a way of determining how to interact with others on a social level. And a lot of the people like him don't have a functioning one of those.
Yeah, he just
I believe
mimicked.
You're right. It is he
just mimicked their personalities. Yes.
And of course, you're right. The fact that we weren't able to pick his brain before he was punished for his crimes in one way or another is part of the tragedy, in my opinion. How much of the mystery surrounding this case comes from the fact that he died before he could ever be fully interrogated?
Huge, Jace. Because Corll was dead. Investigators could never directly question him about, victim totals, where their bodies are, attempted abductions, or even possible additional crimes.
What would you say is the strongest argument that more unsolved cases could be connected to Corll?
Because the combination of multiple burial sites, known accomplice recruitment, missing youths in the area, and of course the incomplete nature of reconstructing the case after, like, Corll's death. I think they just want it to go away. Like, it was so horrific that whoever the Justice Department, or I won't even call them that anymore, at that time, they just literally didn't want anyone to know. And honestly, you don't really know all the truth. We only know what Don Henley said and David Brooks said, and they were kids. But at the same time, I do believe kids in a way, especially traumatized children, because what do they have to hide? Right? There's no more things to hide. And I've noticed that, teens, upper teens tend to tell the truth way more than adults. It makes sense. Because adults think about, hey, what can I lose? What can I this? And I think kids just want to be heard. I just think that so many of the stories, because there's now a lot of allegedlys, like this person knew this person. Oh, I heard this person did this. So, I mean, I think there's way more involved in this case than the boat shed that we found a lot of the victims in, and High Island. I think there's way more to be covered. And I think perhaps he had other accomplices as well, which is really scary for me to say.
I do agree with you on that, but on the flip side, we do want to cover all of our bases. What do you think is the strongest argument against overstating the number of possible victims?
Strongest argument to overstate? That's a good question. I don't know. Some people want to, say he has a lot of victims because of notoriety, right? Like, he's so evil, let's just tack on all these people. Shoddy police work, so we couldn't figure it out, so let's say Dean did it. I think that's the only main reason that they would want to speculate at the same time. But, I mean, it's very plausible. And in fact, like, that was, like I said, John Wayne Gacy time, and they both did the handcuff trick. Because there were 3 ways they did it. The last thing was the magic trick with the handcuffs. The first thing was just supplying the boys with drugs and alcohol, weed, and or he would just drug them. That's what he would do. He would give them a drink, and that was it. And he did it because it made the boys not fight, because they were really lethargic.
So if we were to take this case and drop it into today, do you think it would be handled differently?
100%. 100%. I think if there was, let's just say, the incompetence of a police force that's just not doing good, I think TikTok would take over. I think a mom would go on live and tell them what the heck is going on. I think they would go viral right away. And I think there would be a lot less victims. I think after maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe less than that, it would have never gone on to like in the dozens. Because I can definitely say it's in the dozens.
And piggybacking off of that, what do you think that modern true crime can learn from this case? Not just investigators, but also audiences.
To pay attention to the vulnerable. To question old assumptions about missing youth in the area. And remember that many notorious cases can still contain unresolved elements.
If you had to sum up this case, Dean Corll's case, in one sentence, what would you say?
Man, Charlie, you got that. That's a hard one. I know we said horrific quite a few times.
Yeah. Not one word, one sentence. You get a whole sentence.
Yeah.
Still difficult, but not one word.
It's still very difficult. Yeah. It is so horrific. It is the real boogeyman. It is the Pied Piper. It is the Candyman, who lured kids with sweets. And I think he is, I don't know, just the most insatiable killer I've ever read. And it was never good enough, because usually serial killers, they can't stop killing. They literally can't. It's actually been known. And that scares me, because I'm like, man, he could have stopped a long time ago, but with those accomplices, he gained more ground. And I don't know, for me, he's the boogeyman of children.
Thank you so much for answering our questions. I mean, this is one of those cases that leaves you with more than just horror. It leaves you with a mountain of questions about the victims, about how this went on for so long, and about whether the official story is truly complete.
Yes, and if there's one thing that we want to always emphasize, it's that the victims need to stay at the center of the conversation. They were real people, have real families, and these real families have spent years and decades without answers.
Cases like this also remind us how important it is to keep talking about unresolved identifications, missing persons, and cold case work. Even in older cases, answers can still matter.
And like we said before, if you have any credible information related to unsolved disappearances, unidentified victims, or case connections, don't keep that to yourself. Reach out to the proper law enforcement agencies or the appropriate tip lines.
And if you want to discuss this case with us, share research, or point us towards cases you think need more attention, you can also reach out to Crime Solver Central through the YouTube channel and website.
And please keep that respectful, fact-based and responsible. Speculation is one thing, but real evidence is another.
Thanks again to Katie Brannon from Dark Times with Katie for joining us.
Thank you, ladies, so much for having me. I really enjoyed being here, and thank you so much for having me as a guest, because this case, even though I didn't want to talk about again, it needed to be talked about again. So it means a lot to me that you gave me the time of day.
Right back at you. And if you found this episode important, share it, subscribe, and help keep attention on the cases and the victims who still need answers.
We'll see you next time on Crime Solver Central. Until then, everyone stay safe, stay curious, and stay loud.